I find it really quite difficult to talk about my practice because it doesn't fit into any of the neat boxes of artist or curator. A lot of my work involves slip casting and making moulds from objects and repurposing them. And it had been a kind of a long-held desire to work with one of the factories in Stoke-on-Trent, which is the heartland of ceramic production in the UK, and see if there was a way of working with the moulds they'd used in industry and somehow repurpose them in some way. The local council at Stoke-on-Trent were kind enough to let me into the Spode factory, and Spode has a long history up in Stoke as one of the big ceramic manufacturers. So I was allowed to go into the mould stores and look through their archives of moulds and take some away to work with well at the V&A. With moulds as well, the cast they'll give is hidden inside the mould. You have to open a mould up. So there's a real sense of treasure hunting within the stores. So the moulds that I brought back from Spode are made out of plaster of Paris. And when you pour liquid clay slip into the moulds, the plaster of Paris absorbs the moisture and leaves a skin, a cast of clay. So similar to an Easter egg. You can take these out of the moulds, and then when the clay is still wet, you can attach pieces to other pieces and build composite objects up. That would give me casts from parts of objects, but very few that would give me a complete object. So to try and get all the pieces together for a teapot was near enough impossible. So there was this kind of riddle of what can you say with these fragments of an industrial heritage. I was interested in the idea of legacy and permanence and leaving a mark. I was very aware that ceramics were one of the really permanent materials, and so it kind of made sense in my thinking that if I wanted to think about legacy, then choosing a permanent material like clay seemed to be a sensible material to work with. The response I wasn't prepared for going around the mould store at Spode was that it was quiet, and I was interested in this idea of the moulds being silent. If they're not being used, they're not saying anything. And so if I started casting them again, would there be notes? Would there be noises coming out of these moulds? And I thought, actually, if there are enough notes coming out of these moulds, then maybe they can come together and make a song that potentially could be read visually in the same way as sheet music might be read. I was interested in how a professional musician would read the work, and I'm working with a Greek composer, Dimitrios Skyllas, at the moment, who is composing a piece of music based on the body of work. And I'm interested in these steps removed, that Dimitrios is interpreting my work, which is interpreting the decline of the potteries. The whole piece of work, there's an uncanny edge to it, because things are put in the place that you wouldn't normally expect them. And I kind of think there's an interesting metaphor here almost for how museums construct history, and whether there is a mirroring of what we perceive as the truths of history are so twisted by the information we have or the objects we have. I like to think that history maybe is as uncanny as this piece of work, but we don't read it as such because we believe it's true.